give a big round of applause and give a warm welcome to Michael Roytman.
There were a couple things the previous speakers have said that have been very poignant and very correct about artificial intelligence. The first from the Turing test talk was that data is really the key to both assessing and using AI and ML in the right ways. And the second one from the Smart Cities talk is that often asking the fundamental question of what is a smart city or what does make something secure is much more important than just following what's already laid out in front of you. There are two kinds of data in cybersecurity: what we actually think is happening and what is actually happening on systems. So in 2017, a major Fortune 500 company experienced a breach, but they had ran a simulation across their entire cybersecurity stack: firewalls, endpoint systems, security information management, you name it. It was a $20 million budget, and the results were alarming, but not because any of the systems or tools failed. It was alarming because the alerts never aligned with what was happening and what really mattered. Millions of dollars invested, and yet the team still had to manually sort through signals to understand reality, understand what was happening. So this was not a failure of technology. This was rather a failure of epistemology. What if we've been solving the wrong problems with the wrong data this whole time? Let's think about how cybersecurity has worked historically. We've built defenses, and it's a very new field, like maps. We've laid out what a vulnerability is. We've looked at threat intelligence feeds. We've correlated data in vendors and central locations in the government. But these are abstractions. They are derivative data. They're a couple steps removed from what a machine or a human is doing on the machine, and they don't tell us the raw truth of our environments. They tell us that a vulnerability might matter, something might happen. They don't tell us that something is happening on our systems and what that thing is. And so imagine diagnosing a diabetes patient by just reading the Wikipedia article about diabetes and understanding everything about the disease, but never testing the blood sugar of the patient. That's where cybersecurity was quite a while ago. It sounds ridiculous, but the industry has been pattern matching what's happening from machine to machine instead of understanding system behavior holistically. So what if we could change that? Let's go back 15 years from before 2017, 2002. And that was when the Oakland Athletics were first looking at how to build a baseball team that could win with not a huge budget. They correctly realized that a metric like percentage on base might be more useful than hits at bat. The difference was that one of those metrics described reality, and the other was a metric that we thought was important data, but it was a couple steps removed from winning games. And so in cybersecurity in 2002, that was the first time that a distributed denial of service attack knocked over 13 top-level domains. The internet went down for a while. And the government passed FISMA, which was the first time federal agencies were required to beef up their security defenses. We were just getting started, in other words, in 2002. So when we model cybersecurity from ground truth data, meaning what's really happening on those systems, we understand the physics of the environment, the terrain, rather than a map. When we see what's actually happening on those paths and we can prioritize what's real, not what's popular or what we think is scary, it creates a very different landscape for cybersecurity. And so that's the difference between looking at risks and understanding what happens as a breach unfolds in slow motion before it happens. I want to talk about what ground truth data really is. What is important data? This is the information about what vulnerabilities were used in compromise or in attacks over the past 10 years or so, a little less than that. And you can see those vulnerabilities make it very tangible for you. There's about 16,000 here that have been used in attacks to actually attack businesses, individuals, enterprises, and governments. But what you don't see is that there are about 300,000 vulnerabilities that are published, and about 100 of them are published daily. A typical enterprise might see 10,000 different critical vulnerabilities. Good luck. But finding issues is not the same thing as finding risks. And so I want to take a quick aside and talk about how we'd measure that. This is just baseline information to understand how we measure cybersecurity, but it's also how we measure really all of machine learning. One metric we care about is how efficient we are. So if I tell you that there are 10 issues and you go out and fix them, what percentage of those 10 were actually risks, actually got attacked by somebody. If it's 5 out of 10, you have 50% efficiency with what you're doing, the work you're doing. That alone isn't enough, because if I fix one vulnerability in 10 years, then I'm 100% efficient, but I only fix one. I might still have 9,999 out there, so my efficiency doesn't matter. The other thing we care about is coverage, or of all of the known risks, what can we address? And so looking at this data-driven security mindset and trying to find Moneyball for cybersecurity, in 2019, a team got together between industry, academia, and think tanks and released the exploit prediction scoring system. What we did there was we asked the question of how can we find what is likely to actually get attacked rather than what's possible. To do that, we built a machine learning model. First, we looked at what does it look like, how efficient is it, and how much coverage can you get from undertaking random strategies. Let's say you fix all the Microsoft vulnerabilities across all the systems in a company. What does that get you? It's a very basic question, but it allows us to baseline what we're doing today. And so Microsoft is down there right in the middle of everything. If you fix all of it, the size of the circle is how much work you'd have to do. And you get about 29% efficiency. So 1 in 3 things you do really matters, and the rest are a waste of time or don't reduce your risk. And you get about 25% coverage, which means you reduce your probability of a breach by 25%. That's all great. Can we do better? So in 2019, we looked at what current systems are doing. They're using a common vulnerability scoring system. That's what that looks like. We built a machine learning model, a regression really, using 16 variables in 2019 called the exploit prediction scoring system. And we tried to see if we could do better. It performed a little bit better. And something really magical started to happen once it was released and once the data-driven thing entered the market. 120 vendors used this free and open model, and they started contributing data to allow us to build better and better models. In 2022, we built version 2, which had 1,000 variables in it. It was a true machine learning model. In 23, we built version 3, which had data contributed from even other vendors, more vendors, and the modeling changed a little bit. And just last month, we released version 4, which outperforms all of those. So what are you really looking here? Well, you're looking at something that allows a cybersecurity team to be efficient while also maintaining high levels of coverage. That means not waste time. That means reduce the amount of work their cybersecurity team has to do to get the same amount of risk reduction. But it's not just about machine learning, right? It's about using that data, that ground truth telemetry, to learn something from reality rather than speculation. And so it's about putting algorithms on the exact same footing as adversaries, giving them data about what's really happening in the real world environment. Telemetry is the truth of what's happening out in the world. But alerts or detections or things that we're used to thinking about are really just opinions. Their opinions may be of a company, maybe of a protocol, maybe of an anomaly detection algorithm, but in the end, they're just opinions. In cybersecurity, we've been listening to echoes, to rumors of risk, to potential attacks. But now, as cybersecurity has evolved in its very nascent life, we now have the tools to measure the real thing, to see what's happening on systems, on clouds, at universities, at large-scale enterprises, and even at governments. And so the shift that we're seeing is not just a shift in technology, it's a shift in philosophy. The net of all of this is that we can issue forecasts for cybersecurity now. What you're looking at is a calibration graph for that exploit prediction scoring system. And past its complexity, what it really tells you is that if the system tells you there's a 50% chance of exploitation, then 5 out of 10 times an exploitation takes place. If it tells you there's a 90% chance of exploitation, then 9 out of 10 times an exploitation ends up taking place, which is actually exactly how the Weather Service calibrates its weather forecasts. When they say there's a 50% chance of rain, it doesn't mean rain is going to happen or not. It means 5 out of 10 times when you say there's a 50% chance the rain will happen. So calibrated forecasts built on data from the real world environment are essentially what you would do to make sure that the actions you take in cybersecurity aren't wasteful, are addressing the real risks. And as AI becomes more capable, and as systems become more automated, attackers become more automated, as a different talk alluded to, complexity increases. Our only hope is the ability to see clearly what's happening in the real world. Not to hope or guess what's happening, not to follow dogma and metrics, but rather to measure and build models off of it. Because when the start from the ground truth, the algorithm doesn't just detect the breach, it also gives us the tools to prevent them. Thank you.